The envelope was thick cream-colored and sealed with embossed foil. Jocelyn never did anything halfway. I turned it over in my hands, already knowing what was inside, before I even slid my finger beneath the seal. "You are cordially invited to the Ashby Harlow Annual Christmas Gala," it read, in sweeping script, gold and crimson ink. Below that, the date, the time, the venue. Their estate, of course. It was never just our home. Not with Jocelyn. I smiled faintly, tucking it into the drawer with last year's invitation, though I hadn't attended that one. This time, I thought maybe I would. Nora had been asking about Aunt Jocelyn's chocolate fountain for weeks. Eli had already started making his own ornaments. I imagined them in their little sweaters' faces lit by string lights, cheeks red from the cold. Then the phone rang. Lorraine Jocelyn's voice was overly bright, the way people sound when they've rehearsed being polite. "Just wanted to touch base about the invitation. Of course we'd love to have you, but just you this time." My stomach clenched. Matthew and I have been curating the guest list more intentionally this year. It's just your side of the family. Well, they're not really on our level. I'm sure you understand. I didn't, but I stayed quiet long enough for her to fill the silence. It's nothing personal. We just want to maintain a certain tone. Tone. That was the word she used when she rejected the birthday quilt my sister hand-stitched for Nora. Or when she declined my niece's help serving hors d'oeuvres last year. I told her I understood and hung up. Then I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The invitation still lay in the drawer beside grocery coupons, my reading glasses, and the envelope where I'd once tucked a down payment check made out to Matthew and Jocelyn. 20 years ago, I said yes to help them start their life. I said yes to loans to childcare, to weekends babysitting while they traveled. I said yes, even when it meant working extra shifts. But now, my yes felt like betrayal. Not to them, to myself. I closed the drawer and walked to the hallway, where Nora's ornament was drying on a paper plate. A crooked star painted gold with her name etched in glitter. And I realized I still had time to decide. Matthew was only 12 when the accident took his father. One moment, Ron was kissing me goodbye on the front porch with a thermos of coffee and a smile. And the next, I was identifying his body at the edge of a highway, still wearing the flannel shirt I'd folded for him the night before. I remember the way Matthew's hand slipped into mine at the funeral, too small for what life had just asked of him. I went back to work the following week. The mortgage didn't pause for grief, and neither did the hospital. I picked up extra shifts in the ICU, overnights, holidays, whatever they needed. Matthew grew up in the on-call room waiting for me between classes and practices. I kept a second uniform in the trunk and granola bars in the glove box. When he got into Duke, we celebrated with takeout pizza and a second job. I covered what scholarships didn't, filled out every loan form, and co-signed the rest. I still remember him coming home one break, flushed with excitement. He'd met someone, a girl from Charleston. Sophisticated, he said. Jocelyn Ashby. She was charming. Gracious in that southern way that makes you feel like you've been smiled at and dismissed all at once. When they got engaged, she insisted on hosting the wedding at her parents' estate. Still, they needed help with the down payment on a new house, and Jocelyn's inheritance was always coming soon, but never quite there. I gave what I had and told myself it was love. Over time, I noticed how Jocelyn would flinch when my sister brought over homemade casseroles, or when my niece asked for a second slice of cake at family dinners. She never said much, but she didn't have to. Her glances said plenty. Still, I kept saying yes. When Jocelyn called, panicked over landscaping bills, or when Matthew needed help with the twins' preschool tuition, I told myself I was doing what mothers do. That loyalty meant sacrifice. But sometimes, I wonder if what I called love was just a softer word for erasure. And now, watching Nora press glitter onto cardboard with such hope in her eyes, I knew something had shifted. Nora held the ornament between both hands, like it might dissolve if she breathed too hard. She'd painted it herself, a clay heart fire engine, red with gold dots spiraling outward. On the back, in shaky but determined lettering, she'd written, "To Aunt Jocelyn Mary. Christmas love, Nora." She wrapped it in layer after layer of tissue paper, each one more precise than the last. "Do you think she'll like it?" she asked, eyes wide with the kind of hope only a child still unbruised by dismissal can carry. "I think she'll love it," I said, though. My voice caught around the lie. Across the room, Eli was crouched by the bookshelf, sifting through last year's photos. "Do you think Uncle Matt will hide the golden truffle again? Remember how close I got?" I nodded, my smile thin. I remember. They had no idea. No idea that the same aunt they adored didn't want them there. That the invitation with all its flourishes came with an unspoken price, one that demanded the silence of real lives to protect an illusion. That evening, while they were brushing their teeth, I stood in the doorway of the hallway closet. The invitation sat in the drawer where I'd left it. The embossed gold looked theatrical now, like a prop in a story Jocelyn was trying to rewrite without us in it. I could tell them we weren't going. Say something vague about plans changing, about work, about weather. But I'd be teaching them shame they hadn't earned. I'd be passing on a lesson I'd spent decades resisting, that some people have the power to decide who belongs and others are expected to stay quiet and nod. No, not this time. I ironed Eli's dress shirt that night, polished Nora's shoes, took my black dress from the dry cleaner's bag and laid it across the bed. We were going, all three of us. Let Jocelyn be the one to explain exclusion in front of her friends, her walls, and her perfectly lit tree. The driveway curved like a question mark through manicured pines freshly dusted with snow. The gates had been left open, but the message was still clear. This was not a home, it was a showcase. I parked behind a row of imported SUVs, my modest sedan, looking like it had wandered into the wrong movie set. In the back seat, Nora's nose was pressed to the glass. "It's like a palace," she whispered. Eli kicked his feet gently against the floor mat. "Do you think Uncle Matt already hid the golden truffle?" "I'm sure he did," I said, smoothing my coat and taking a breath before stepping out. The front door opened before we could knock. Jocelyn stood in the entryway, framed by garland and a pair of towering nutcrackers. Her red dress shimmered, tailored to perfection. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Lorraine," she said, her voice tight. "And the kids. We're happy to be here," I said, matching her tone with practiced calm. Matthew appeared behind her cheeks, flushed from the cold. "Mom, I didn't know you were bringing Nora and Eli. What a great surprise." He bent down to hug them both. "You two ready for cocoa and scavenger hunts?" Nora beamed and held out the carefully wrapped ornament. "I made this for Aunt Jocelyn. It's for your tree." Jocelyn took it between her fingertips as though it might stain her skin. "How thoughtful," she said, after a pause. "We have a very specific design theme this year, white and gold only. But I'll find a special place for this later." Nora's smile faltered, just for a moment. She nodded and looked down at her boots. Matthew, sensing the awkwardness, placed a hand on her shoulder. "Maybe we can hang it in the family den. That's where we keep the really special ones, right?" "Of course," Jocelyn said quickly, already turning away. I followed the children into the house, past velvet garlands and curated elegance, my heels echoing across imported stone. I had swallowed a lot over the years, words, slights, disappointments. But in that moment, watching Nora tuck her gift back under her arm, I felt something shift. It wasn't rage. It was resolve. The dining room glowed under a chandelier so large it looked like it had been lowered from a hotel ballroom. The table stretched long enough to seat 30, every place set, with silver-rimmed china and crystal goblets that looked too delicate to touch. Guests began filtering in their laughter, hushed their movements, choreographed like they'd rehearsed this very meal. We hovered near the entrance, waiting for direction. Jocelyn approached with a theatrical frown, holding a stack of place cards. "Oh dear," she said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "It seems our calligrapher didn't prepare name cards for you three, since you weren't on the original list. But I'm sure we can find a spot." She offered a tight smile. Matthew stepped forward immediately. "They can sit by me," he said. "There's plenty of room." A few guests looked up from their chairs, polite but curious. I guided Nora and Eli toward the seats beside Matthew, pretending not to notice that our settings were missing the ornate napkin rings and custom-printed menus everyone else had. As I reached for a chair, Jocelyn leaned in close. "If anyone asks, just say you live north of the city," she whispered, "and maybe avoid mentioning your job. Some guests are sensitive." My jaw tensed. I nodded once, then turned away. The first course arrived something creamy with truffle oil and microgreens. Eli hesitated. Nora picked up her spoon like it was a test she didn't study for. Across the table, someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, Jocelyn laughed lightly. "She's a nurse. Pediatrics. Noble work. Very hands-on." "I love it," I said. "Kids are honest. It keeps me grounded." Matthew smiled at that. "Mom's been at County for over 20 years. She trained half the ER. Conversation moved on, but I saw Jocelyn stiffen. She sipped from her wine glass without speaking. Eli reached for his water, his hand brushing the base of the goblet too quickly. It tipped, spilling in a cold arc across the linen tablecloth. "I'm sorry," he gasped, grabbing his napkin, eyes wide. Jocelyn's voice cut through the room like ice cracking. "This is why children should eat separately, until they're properly trained." The words hung in the air. Eli froze shoulders tight. Nora looked at me, waiting. I reached for Eli's hand, squeezing gently. Then I picked up my napkin and helped him mop the table. He wasn't the one who needed correcting. That much I finally understood. The dessert course had just arrived, something sculpted and delicate, all angles and dusted gold. I didn't touch mine. Nora picked at hers. Eli had pushed his spoon around in a slow circle until the cream gave way to porcelain. Across the table, Jocelyn laughed at something one of her friends said about ski lodges in Vail. Her wine glass tilted just enough to catch the light. I stood. The shift in energy was subtle, but immediate. Forks paused. A few heads turned. Jocelyn glanced at me, confused, then wary. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, steadying my voice with a breath I'd been holding for years. "To Matthew and Jocelyn for hosting such a beautiful evening." Jocelyn relaxed slightly, raising her glass. "To family," she offered. I smiled. "Yes, to family." I turned toward the room. "I imagine some of you are wondering who we are. The woman and 2 children without place cards. The ornament that didn't match. The water glass that fell." A few guests looked uncomfortable. Others waited. "I'm Matthew's mother," I continued. "And for nearly 15 years I've contributed quietly to this household. When the down payment came up short, I covered it. When designer upgrades were chosen over structural repairs, I said yes. When a landscaping bill came due, or a credit card was maxed during holiday season, I was the one who transferred funds. Monthly for years." Jocelyn sat very still. "And for those who are curious, I added this estate. You're admiring the decor, the renovations, the curated perfection. It stands on about $2,000 a month. From a pediatric nurse who was told she wasn't good enough to bring her family here tonight." Gasps. A soft clatter of silverware. Matthew looked stunned. I didn't wait for permission. "I'm not angry. Not anymore. I allowed it. I said yes because I thought it was love. Because I believed I was protecting my son's happiness. Because I didn't think I had another role to play." I looked at Nora, at Eli. But this will be my last gift. I'm keeping what's left of me for the people who never asked me to become small, who never needed me to fund their dignity, who already had enough just by being loved. I raised my glass. To the truth. May it finally be enough for all of us. And I sat down. Calm. Empty. Whole. The night air bit through my coat as I helped Nora and Eli with their jackets. I thanked Richard for the meal. He was the only one who met my eyes and guided the children toward the front door. Conversation behind us was hushed, strained. Jocelyn hadn't said a word since the toast. We stepped outside into the snow-laced quiet. The path back to our car sparkled under the porch lights. I opened the back doors, helped the kids in, and buckled their seatbelts with the kind of deliberate tenderness that comes when your hands are holding more than buttons and straps. They're holding a boundary. I had just shut the door when I heard heels slipping against stone. You humiliated me, Jocelyn hissed, breathless. In front of everyone. I turned. She stood just outside the entryway, arms wrapped tight around herself, red dress glowing against the cold. Behind her, Matthew appeared, still in his dinner jacket, face unreadable. Is it true? He asked. All of it. I didn't answer. I simply handed him my phone. The banking app was open. 7 years of transfers, deposits, canceled checks. His thumb swiped once, then stopped. The numbers spoke for themselves. Jocelyn looked at me, eyes wide. You said yes all those times. You offered. You never said no. No, I said, softly. I didn't. Until tonight. Matthew stood there, silent, the weight of it crashing down in real time. The dinners, the upgrades, the gifts that had come out of nowhere. He wasn't a fool. Just someone who hadn't looked closely until now. I turned toward the car. My hand was on the driver's side door when Jocelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. What am I supposed to do now? I faced her one last time. Learn. Then I got in. Started the engine and drove away from a house built on my silence toward something quieter. But finally, mine. The house was dark when we returned, the kind of dark that welcomes, not judges. I unlocked the door, and the smell of cinnamon and pine met us like an old friend. The tree stood in the corner of the living room, glowing quietly. Its branches weighed not with elegance, but with memory. Felt stars stitched by little fingers, uneven candy canes painted clothespin reindeer. A hodgepodge of years and hands and effort. Hours. Nora stepped inside first. She still held the ornament, now slightly crumpled, the tissue soft at the edges. Without a word, she walked over to the tree and found a branch near the top. She hooked the ribbon, adjusted it once, and stepped back. It fits better here anyway, she said. Eli stood beside her, his hands in his coat pockets, looking at each ornament like he was counting proof. I knelt down beside them. Do you know why I love this tree? I asked. They both looked up. Because it's real. It's not perfect, but everything on it came from someone's heart. Not a magazine or a decorator. Just us. People who showed up for each other. Nora leaned her head against my shoulder. Is Aunt Jocelyn mad? I wrapped an arm around her. Maybe. But sometimes people get mad when they hear the truth out loud, especially when they've been pretending for too long. Eli yawned, pulling at his scarf. Can we still have hot chocolate? I smiled. We're overdue. Within 10 minutes, we were in pajamas. I stirred cocoa on the stove while they set out the mugs, chipped, mismatched, and ours. We curled up on the couch, under a fleece blanket that had started fraying years ago, the kind of softness you can't buy new. Nora held her mug with both hands, careful and still. It's better here, she said again, glancing at her ornament on the tree. She was right. It was. I sipped my cocoa slowly, letting the silence wrap around us. No performance, no pretense. Just warmth and the soft hum of belonging. It was the first time in years I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. It was the Thursday after Christmas when Matthew called. I was folding laundry in the living room, the last of the cocoa-stained pajamas and mitten pairs, when the phone buzzed across the coffee table. His name lit up the screen. I answered on the second ring. "Hi, Mom." His voice was tight, quieter than usual. I sat down. "She's in counseling," he said. "She started this week." Voluntarily, I didn't respond. He kept going. I didn't know how much of it, how long. I went through our accounts. There were credit cards I didn't recognize. Loans taken out in both our names. She'd been hiding invoices using statements from a shared folder and deleting others before I could see them. I closed my eyes and waited. "There's debt, Mom. Real debt. I thought we were comfortable, but we were just curated. For show." "I know." He paused. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I folded a dish towel, slowly laying it across my lap. "Because you weren't supposed to see it," I said. "That's how dependency works. It hides in plain sight, beneath what looks like gratitude, or charm, or apology. It convinces you that if you keep giving, you're being kind. And if you stop, you're being cruel." "I'm sorry," he said, "for not seeing you, for letting her speak for both of us." I didn't rush to forgive him. I just let the words settle. "I want to fix this," he added. "Not just the money. I mean, us." That word, us. It had been so long since I'd heard it without strings. "You don't need to fix me, Matthew," I said gently. "You just have to see me. And take it from there." We sat in silence, miles apart, but not entirely distant anymore. "That's fair," he said. "That's where I'll start." And the line stayed open. Quiet. Unrushed. Epilogue. The ornament she kept. The envelope arrived in early March. My name was written in careful print across the front, too neat to be rushed, too restrained to be warm. Inside was a folded check and a note with 5 words, "A start." More will follow. No signature, no apology. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that the silence wasn't already saying for me. I deposited the check and kept the letter in a drawer with old receipts and expired coupons. But the thing I kept closest was Nora's ornament. The gold star once meant for a tree we were never invited to join, now lived in the side pocket of my purse. I didn't carry it for sentiment. I carried it for memory, for reminder, for proof that once I stopped pretending, that I chose my voice over their approval, that I made space at the table for the ones who were told they didn't belong. The mirror in my hallway caught me one morning on my way to work, coffee and hand badge clipped to my collar. I paused just long enough to really look. For a long time, I'd let others define my place, my worth, my role in their version of a perfect life. But that morning, I met my own gaze and held it. "I am not small," I whispered. "I am not less. I am enough." And for once, I didn't just believe it. I knew it.